Hello, you are welcome to week 4 of this course. I am Amusa Jamiu Oluwadamilare. This week is divided into two units. The first part focuses on 20th century scientific revolution, while the second unit dwells on science, technology and inventions. Since the end of the 19th century, great advances have been made in our knowledge of life and its manifestation. These advances have touched all aspects of life, such as industries of all types, pharmaceuticals, chemical, clothing, wood, medicine, and several others. Transportation and communication have already shrunk the world into a global village. Even in wars, science has also been a key factor. Hence, the race to be the first with radar, with an atomic bomb, or with a nuclear submarine. At the end of this unit, you should be able to do the following. 1. Discuss briefly how the discovery of X-ray and the formulation of theory of relativity redefined physics of the 20th century. 2. Write a short note on the term biotechnology. 3. Outline vividly with an illustration the basic idea in genetic engineering. And lastly, write short notes on at least 3 electronic communication devices. Let us start with discussion on 20th century scientific revolution. The chief ideas by which those advances have been guided were formulated before 1901. Mathematics and physics of the 20th century were characterized by a true revolution in thought, while 20th century biology still followed the main lines laid down by before the century began. Sir Francis Bacon expressed his belief that with the increase in knowledge of nature, man will soon be a master to nature. Thus, with the explosion of knowledge in the 18th and 19th century, it seemed as if Bacon's dream would soon be realized. Science was moving ahead of all fronts. In all fronts, reducing ignorance and producing new tools to make the condition of human being better. But this good news did not last long in physics, especially at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, there are several physical sciences, and we are going to, break up some issues on them. Some discoveries in physics, which really led to a true revolution, are worthy considering here. In December 1895, the German physicist Wilhelm Röntgen discovered the X-rays. X-rays, as you know, are used in hospitals to destroy cancerous cells, to look at bones, to check if they are broken or dislocated, especially after an accident. In industries, X-ray photographs are used to reveal hidden cracks in metal casting and welded joints. X-rays are also used to detect alteration which have been made to artworks. The discovery of X-rays and radioactivity revealed to the physicists that the structure of the atom was not as simple as they thought. There were other components of the atom which they didn't know about, such as electron and proton. Hence, the definition of the atom as the indivisible particle of matter had to change. The most disturbing of all the upsetting results of early 20th century physics was the formulation of theory of relativity by Albert Einstein in 1905. When this theory was first published, it was said that only 12 or so scientists could understand it. The theory redefined physics, thus making classical Newtonian physics obsolete. According to Newtonian physics, time, space, motion and so on were objective properties. That is to say, they exist on their own. But Einstein noted that the existence of motion, for instance, could have meaning only if it is considered relative to something which is fixed. If you are sitting in a moving train and looking out through the window, you will see things moving by quickly. That will make you know you are in motion. But there's a man sitting opposite you and relative to to him, you are not moving at all. I mean, judging by that man that is sitting beside you, it shows that you are not moving at all. That is the first basic part of Einstein theory. The second basic part of his theory said that the only absolute unchanging quantity in the universe was the speed of light. Because of this theory, the very foundation of physics threatened to crumble. In spite of all this, it may interest you to know that science in the 20th century worked wonders. The new physics, relativity, quantum mechanics, particle physics, may insult our common sense, but it enables physicists to examine closely the minutest part of matter. It may especially interest chemistry students to know that chemists of the 20th century used the new information about atoms reported by the physicists to improve the idea about chemical bond. This led to the production of many new compounds. They also developed a variety of plastics, synthetic fibers such as nylon and polyesters, and synthetic rubber. It is good for you to know that all the plastics, cups, plates, basins, slippers, and so on, which were used in our homes, were produced by using the new information about atoms. Polyester nylon stockings, shirts, and dresses are practical things made from the new information about atoms. The chemists also developed drugs, food preservatives, and synthetic chemicals for use in agriculture. It may also interest you to know that astronomy and cosmology have been transformed almost beyond recognition. This is because of the invention of new instruments like radio telescope, orbiting laboratories, a lunar and planetary probe, and so on. In 1969, men worked on the moon, and unmanned landings have been made on the planets Mars and Venus. In the 1970s, as a matter of fact, the first men to walk on the moon were American astronauts called Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin. The first woman also in space is Valentina Tereshkova, and that was in 1963. Now, it is now time to consider, advances in biotechnology. Modern biotechnology is now recognized as one of the most developments of the 20th century. Of the many uses of biotechnology are test tube babies, artificial insemination, gene cloning, animal cloning, among others. Biotechnology is not an academic discipline like biology or chemistry. It is not a product but a process. Biotechnology is multidisciplinary. This means that many disciplines are involved in it. Any biotechnological activities, they include microbiology, biochemistry, genetics, plant and animal biology, chemical and process engineering. Biotechnology is therefore defined as the techniques that make use of living organisms or part of organisms such as cells to make or produce, to improve plants and animals, or to develop microorganisms for specific applications. The aim of using these techniques is to increase the production of goods and services for the benefit of mankind. Some of the techniques of biotechnology are as follows: cell and tissue culture technique, fermentation technology, cell fusion, embryo transfer, among others. Genetic engineering is the hard core of biotechnology because it's also part of biotechnology. That is the reason why many people mistakenly assume that biotechnology means genetic engineering. Our emphasis in this section will be on genetic engineering. Can you imagine a potato plant that makes plastic, a tobacco plant that glows in the dark, or truly tasty tomato from the market? All these products have already been made by genetic engineering. What is genetic engineering? Genetic engineering is the transfer of genes from one organism to another. A gene is the basic unit of heredity. Heredity is also transmission of characteristics from parent to offspring through the gamete. Let us trace our steps a little. You might want to know the exact function of a gene. Genes are responsible for all the characteristics of living things. This means that the genes, responsible for the color of the skin. There are genes responsible, for the color of the skin, and there are genes responsible for the shape of our nose, our height. Even in flowers, there are genes that are responsible for the color of flowers in plants. So, when it's said that genes are the basic unit of heredity, it means that the genes for the different characteristics are what are transferred from parent to offspring. If I tell you that I resemble my mother in height, and if my mother is tall, it means that my mother transferred a gene for tallness to me through a gamete called the egg or ova. The male gamete in the father is called sperm. Every human being is built up through the fusion of the sperm and an egg. Whatever characteristics parents pass on to their children are contained in the gene found in both sperm and the eggs. What happens in genetic engineering is this. If you have a chicken which lay only small eggs, but you want it to start laying big eggs, what you will do is this. Find a chicken that lays big egg. Collect the gene responsible for those big eggs. Of course, there are techniques for that. And transfer them into your own chicken. Your chicken will start laying big eggs. An interesting fact here is that no matter where you put a gene, it will still perform that function assigned to it. Genetic engineering was born in the 1980s. Since then, the technique has been applied in pharmacy, medicine, agriculture industry, and several other places. In the examples that began this section, the potato plant has bacterial gene that make polymers, which can be used to make biodegradable plastics. In other words, there are some bacteria that are difficult to grow, but they make small amount of polymers, which can be used to make plastics. The polymer genes, were obtained from that bacteria and put into another bacteria that grows fast. While the second bacteria, called E. coli, started producing polymers. However, polymer production is still low. Scientists are working hard to see how to increase the quantity of polymer production. Would you be able to tell the advantage of this? If the polymer production is increased, it means that biodegradable plastics will now be produced. They will therefore replace the petroleum-based plastic, which remain in the environment for too long, thereby causing pollution. The implication is that the old plastic cups, buckets, basins will not be lying around the compound. They will be decomposed by decomposing organisms. Let us continue from where we stopped. We were discussing the application of genetic engineering technique to solving practical man problems. In pharmaceuticals, some of the medically important proteins are now being produced through this process. Some of them include human insulin for the treatment of diabetics, human interferon, a rare protein that increases human resistance to viral infection, tissue plasminogen activator. It is a protein produced by the body in minute amounts that causes blood clot to dissolve. Its effectiveness in preventing heart attack and stroke is being studied. Another one is atria peptide. It's a small protein produced in the hearts of mammals that regulates blood pressure and kidney function. Genetically engineered versions are being tested as possible in new ways to treat high blood pressure and kidney failure. In agriculture, Application of genetic engineering include the following: herbicide resistance. Soya beans, maize, and cotton plant resistant herbicide have been produced. The presence of weeds in any form is a source of concern to any farmer. In traditional agriculture, weeding of the farm is done at interval, and it is tiresome activity. In agriculture, herbicides, which are chemicals, are sprayed on the farm. The disadvantage is that sometimes both the plants you are trying to protect and the weed destroy. Through genetic engineering of specific crops, the crops are now resistant to the herbicide. So, herbicide can now be sprayed on fields harboring such crops without any fear. On insect resistance, there is a bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis. It produces a toxin that kills insects fast. Through genetic engineering, the gene responsible for producing that toxins was extracted from the bacterium. It was then cloned into tomatoes, potatoes, and tobaccos and some other plants. This resulted in the production of the toxin by the plant. Hence, whenever any insect larva eats, for instance, the leaf of any of the plants, the digestive process of the insect is interrupted and the insect dies. The only problem here is that these results of genetic engineering are being enjoyed mostly by farmers in Europe and America. There are other applications of genetic engineering. An example is in human cloning. This means producing offspring that are genetically identical to the individual from whom a cell nucleus has been obtained. There are various reasons people give for wanting to do this. It involves getting a cell from, say, let's say Mr. John. The cell is manipulated in certain ways in the laboratory. After some time, an embryo will start developing from that cell. The embryo is transferred back into Mr. Johnson's wives. After 9 months, another Mr. Johnson or Mr. John, but now in a baby form of him will be born. This is because the adult Mr. Johnson or Mr. John and the baby Mr. John will have the same gene in their bodies. It is important that we take note of one fact in this process. The new baby originated from a body cell of Mr. John and not from the fusion of the sperm from Mr. John and the egg from his wife. Presently, there are laws in the United Kingdom and some other developed countries against human cloning. Bills have been passed in the US Congress to protect the cloning of human beings. Let's quickly talk about transportation and communication. The 20th century has witnessed dramatic changes and improvements in the areas of transport and communication. Do you know that the aeroplane is an invention of the 20th century? Imagine how people would live before that century. Without, how did they cope without the fastest means of transportation? It was in 1903 that two American bicycle makers called Orville and Wilbur Wright built the first petrol engine aeroplane. It became the first aeroplane not only to lift a person into air but also to fly successfully. Since some other people before these Bright brothers had tried to build a flight machine but they were not successful, the two brothers got the credit for building the first aeroplane. Aeroplanes with jet engines were built during the late 1930s by German engineers. The first supersonic passenger airliner, called the Concorde, began flight services between Europe and United States in 1976. These are called supersonic jets because they travel at about 2,400 km per hour, which means that they exceeded the speed of sound. Normal aeroplanes, on the other hand, travel at 800 to 1,000 km per hour. Do you know why the 20th century is called the space age? Although men of the previous centuries studied the planets and other heavenly bodies from the earth with the aid of instruments, It is the men of the 20th century that actually decided to go to some of those planets and heavenly bodies to see what they look like. A 27-year-old Russian called Yuri Gagarin was the first person to be in space. He orbited the Earth for the first time, on 12th April 1961. He stayed in orbit for 180 minutes, over an hour. He was called the Columbus of the interplanetary age. The first American in space is called Alan Shepard. These days, men and women enter the space and return to Earth like a normal journey. It will not be out of place to also call the 20th century the age of communication. The world is now a global village. A global village as a result of development in the transport and communication industry. The traditional electronic means of communication, such as the fax, the telephone, the radio, and television, are now in commonplace. They are commonplace devices, despite the improvements made, in some of them. For instance, cellular telephones were introduced in 1979. They have made it possible for people to communicate without the restriction of telephone lines, and geographical location. What about the telephone? Do you know anything about its development? It is one of the additional developments of the 20th century that made it possible to use single telephone lines for several, simultaneous transmission. This line, for example, may transmit cable TV, broadcast, and phone calls simultaneously. Many TV stations in Nigeria, both government owned and privately owned, are now, they now use these devices. The single telephone line can also serve as a picture phone or video conferencing device. Picture phone or video phone is where the caller's pictures are transmitted along with their voices. It was first introduced in 1964. CNN and BBC often use this technology for their broadcast. The first communication satellite, called Echo 1, was launched by the United States in 1960. A communication satellite is a transport vehicle launched into space to transport existing forms of communication devices, such as cameras, radio, television, and so on. The satellite enables the communication devices to operate at a far greater distance and add vast amount of information to mass knowledge. Therefore, communication satellites serve as a relay station. They can relay several television programs, or many thousands of telephones calls at once. Thus, if you install the necessary equipment, you can turn your TV on and watch programs from any TV station of your choice. You can watch programs for BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera. You can also work from Channels Television and many other television by just sitting in your house. The TV station are changed with the aid of remote control. There is hardly any sector of human endeavor that is unaffected by computer technology. Your home, the school, universities, military, police, barracks, banks, medicine, and several other places. Indeed, the computer revolution is total and has completely replaced the industrial revolution of the last 150 years or so. The first electronic digital computer was built in 1946 and was called ENIAC. By ENIAC I mean Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. It was built by two United States engineers, Presper and Eckert, and John William Mauchly. The internet is another invention of the 20th century. It began in early 1970s as a US Defense Department network called ARPANET. What then is an internet? What is your understanding of internet? What is a network? A network is a group of connected computers that allow people to share information and equipment. The internet is a collection of various computer networks linked together, and communicating by a common protocol known as TCP or IP, Transmission Control Protocol or Internet Protocol. In order for your PC, personal computer, to communicate with other computer using TCP or IP, you must have the appropriate TCP or IP software installed and properly configured. When someone talks about being on the internet, it means that his or her computer is connected to one of the interconnected networks that make up the internet. Some of the facilities and services which internet can provide to subscribers are as follows: electronic mail, that is email. The email works just like a post office. Your email address provides all the information required to get an electronic message to you from anywhere in the world. The email has two distinct advantages over regular mail. The first obvious advantage is speed. Instead of several days or even weeks, your message can reach the other side of the world in minutes. The other advantage is that you can use your email address to access database and file libraries. We also have file transfer protocol. By using this, one can copy a file from a computer in New York or any other part of the country to one in Nigeria at a very fast speed. There's also what we call Telnet. Many institutions of higher learning in advanced countries have made their libraries catalog available for searching by anyone on the internet through Telnet. Library catalog give information on the books, journals, and periodicals that are available in a particular library. Most universities in Nigeria still use the manual, that is catalog, but until recent time, that we are now using to electronic library, as in the case of National Open University of Nigeria. In Nigeria, as you might be aware, oil companies, banks, tertiary institutions of learning, many government bodies have acquired mainframe computers. Many individuals, business, small and medium, homes now have computers. Computer science is now being taught in primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions of learning. Satellite dishes can be found in a number of homes, hotels, offices, and so on, for the reception of broadcast signal from foreign states. There are several other developments that have happened, with Siemens and other German contracting company. You can see that some building blocks that will enable Nigeria to join the information superhighway are already in place. Now let us talk about the application of science, technology in war. Science in the 20th century has also been a key to victory in war. Key success to victory in war. Of course, this is negative contribution. That is why many nations have now entered into a race of who will be the first with radar, with an atomic bomb, or with a nuclear submarine. The greatest problem facing man and his ecosystem today is the possibility of nuclear war. Nuclear war. The bombing was done by the Americans. Talking about those in Japan, the crisis in Japan and other places. Let us retake our discussion on contribution of science and technology to war, even though their contribution is negative. That is why many nations are now have entered into the race of who will be the first with radar, atomic bomb, or with nuclear submarine. The greatest problem facing man and his ecosystem today is the possibility of a nuclear war. The nuclear weapon of destruction, such as atomic, hydrogen, and neutron bomb, have been stockpiled by both developed and developing nations. Nuclear weapons are real and could put the human race, out of existence within a twinkle of an eye. These bombs derive their energy from the nucleus of atom. Can you imagine, or can you give an example of the use of atomic bomb in the 20th century? The importance of atomic bomb in the 20th century. You might have heard of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These were the two Japanese cities leveled with atomic bomb during the Second World War in 1945. The bombing was done by the Americans. They did this in retaliation of the Japanese surprise attack on the American fleet at the Pearl Harbor in 1941. As a result of this, American Arizona ship was sunk with a loss of about 1,000 Navy. The effect of atomic bomb is also devastating. When an atomic bomb is released, the radioactive fallout or dust have radioactive particles of iodine, chemical element of carbon, hydrogen, strontium. All these are dangerous to Earth since they contaminate the soil, water, air, and all living things. The damage the central nervous system, cells of the intestine lining and bone marrow, anemia, leukemia, cancers of the breast and stomach are some of the results of damage to the bone marrow. And let's quickly have a recap of what has been discussed in this lecture. There are indeed been scientific revolution in the 20th century. In the 20th century, we have seen both the ingenuity and stupidity of man. That is why philosophy of science is very important. Scientists do not worry about planning, direction, and guidance in their activities. This is why there is overpopulation, nuclear proliferation, environmental abuse, and so on. Philosophers of the science pay close attention to all this. They try to rationalize most scientific inventions and try to give direction to scientific activities. Philosophy of science will be discussed in our coming lectures. Till we meet again. Bye.